time for a Season 17 Overwatch 2 Stadium tier list. Hey everyone, this is Connor here at the Game House. Excited today to get this list together. Honestly, with the introduction of Junkrat, Sigma, and Zenyatta to Stadium, I feel like the meta has been shaken up a little bit. I feel like a lot of characters' kind of stocks have gone up and down based on that. And at least in my games that I've played so far this season, I've noticed some definite trends that are different from Season 16. So overall, very excited to get into this. Some quick qualifiers. This is meant to be a kind of one-size-fits-all tier list. So if you feel like, I'm a top 1% player, this isn't really making sense for me. Well, I'm not that, and I'm not necessarily making this list just for that player. I'm trying to make this list accessible for everyone, so there are some considerations based on heroes that are, easier to play, maybe to a degree. But all in all, I want this to be a list just based on how overtuned I think each hero is, generally speaking. That is kind of what this list is after, is if I'm picking up a hero, how good should it be on any given playthrough based on a number of different things, right? So we're just going to go one hero at a time and get right into this. So I think we'll start with D.Va. D.Va is an interesting one. I feel like the mitigation is really strong with D.Va, and the ability to kind of stay frontline heavy and mitigate using the rockets even as a kind of countermeasure ability. And so I feel like D.Va has actually been pretty viable so far in the current meta, and I'm actually going to put D.Va in B tier. It feels like an appropriate spot. I don't feel like, necessarily speaking, that the new heroes have made a massive impact here. Pair that with maybe some of the Reinhardt nerfs from last season, taking him out of being just this like monster. I think D.Va can have a much more viable time. I really like doing a pretty heavy Matrix build with her. I think that has been kind of the strategy that's worked best in my games. So we'll start with D.Va in B tier. We go on to Junker Queen. Junker Queen's interesting. I don't see as much Junker Queen in my games, even though I feel like she is pretty good still. Honestly, I think Junker Queen is right there with D.Va in B tier. The Shout kind of cooldown cycling build I still feel is pretty effective. And I still feel like has a ton of viability in the current meta. So if you're looking for a frontline, maybe you're queuing with some friends and maybe you have one on each role. If you can go for a Queen, maybe with a Reaper or Mei up front with you to give some extra kind of beefiness, and maybe even like a Moira, I think that can be a really devastating frontline in Stadium at just about any rank. So for me, I have Junker Queen in B tier. Orisa is a tricky one. It could just be a me issue, but I have not found a build for Orisa that has just convinced me that this character is strong right now. And I've run into a few, and it has honestly felt like there's just not enough in the toolkit for Orisa to be strong. Maybe it was that the Orisas I've run into have been under-healed. There could be a lot of different variables there, right? I am going to put Orisa in D tier. This might feel like a little bit of an over-exaggeration for the kind of state of the hero, but all things considered, I just don't think Orisa is viable right now. I think I would rather play any other tank pretty definitively over Orisa. So D tier it is. If you're watching this video and you have a build that you really like for the horse and you think is viable, please let me know. I would be honestly interested to find out what that is and how to be better with Orisa. We'll move now to Reinhardt. Reinhardt was nerfed in Season 16 and had some things kind of tweaked with what his kit can do. I think just to try and get away from the Stadium just turning into a brawl fest constantly, and I think a really strong Reinhardt can just solely dictate that meta to a degree. But even with the changes, I still feel like Reinhardt is just better than a lot of the other tanks right now, and I have him in A tier. This is going to be a thing in Stadium. This has been a thing in Overwatch for a long time. But when you introduce a massive shield, when there aren't a lot of shields, it can be very strong. Especially when you have a lot, heavy hit scan presence. Just in the DPS hero pool, there's a lot of kind of hit scan poke that can't necessarily shred a shield super quickly. Now, Junkrat being introduced is interesting. It's a bit of a tank buster, a bit of a shield buster. So we'll have to keep an eye on Reinhardt, and this could change in the mid-season patch. But I still think, even with a nerf, Reinhardt is still very strong in Season 17 of Stadium. Now we have our first new hero in the list, Sigma. I think Sigma comes in and offers a really interesting kind of alternative if you want to play a shield hero. He certainly has a different playstyle than Reinhardt, where you can play up close with his kind of double orbit build. I have a build on the channel actually with that exact thing in mind, where you kind of want to get in close, but you can also play him where you just kind of maximize your shield, either throw the really fast accretions through it, or just kind of play more defensively in general. I think with the toolkit and with the flexibility, Sigma is actually my first S tier choice in this list. I just feel like the performance has been really top notch for me so far. It could just be my lobbies. You know, there's always a bit of personal bias here. I'm not basing this just on my games, but every time I have played Sigma, it has felt like I have been able to control pace and take space and do a lot that I'm not quite able to do with some of the other heroes. So it's good to see. This makes sense a lot of times when you see new heroes introduced. Like when Freja was introduced in Season 16, they immediately had to nerf her because she was just way too strong. I think Sigma will get a mid-season nerf. It won't be quite as severe as Freja's, I don't think, but he still feels very strong to me in the current landscape. And then Zarya is last, and honestly, I think Zarya is the toughest tank to kind of rank right now in Stadium Season 17. I still think the bubbles can be really strong if you can get your primary fire going. It can still just be this very shreddy tank. However, with Sigma, so Sigma's interesting. Sigma and Reinhardt, the other two, top tanks as counters to Zarya are interesting. Reinhardt, I think, is a good counter to Zarya. I think his shield can outlast bubbles. Unless she can get a bubble off, it's pretty easy to shatter the whole team. But Sigma is a little different. Obviously, his suck ability does not handle beams, and his shield's a little bit easier to wear out. So I think Zarya actually can be serviceable into Sigma. Because of that, I'm actually going to put her top of B tier, kind of stacked up with the other tanks. And so this is how I see the tanks shaking out right now. And I think this is pretty fair. If I were to do anything, I'm doing this. I didn't want to have anything pre-prepared. I'm doing this at truly honest reactionary. I would maybe bump Queen down to C, but that's honestly just to try and even it out a little bit in my head. I think this is a pretty good setup for where tanks are at in Stadium right now. But obviously, let me know what you think in the comments. I would honestly be very interested to hear how people react to this. There's not many tier lists out right now for Season 17, so usually I like to kind of compile what some community sentiments are, look at win rates, stuff like that. It has been a little bit more challenging to do that because we're so fresh into the season. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Let's get into DPS, though, before we get to support. And we'll start with Ashe. I think last time I made a tier list, Ashe was in D tier because there was just nothing I could figure out that felt good with Ashe. And I still kind of feel that way. I think the Dynamite build has a bit more viability now, but I still don't feel good about anything higher than C tier for Ashe. There just something needs to be done for this hero to be. There just feels like there's better options for poke, whether it's Soldier, whether it's Freja, even Cassidy. I think I would take all three of those over Ashe. And so, with them having similar offerings, it just is a tough hero. Now, that being said, obviously in this list, a caveat, now that we're 9 minutes into the video, caveat, all the lower tier heroes can still dominate, and I think Ashe is a great example. I have run into some Ashes that have been crazy to deal with. I mean, especially if you throw in the mini Bob cycling, it can get pretty out of hand, right? But still, I think this is a lower tiered hero in general. Cassidy is a tricky one. I'm actually going to go B tier, but kind of bottom of B tier with Cassidy. These are kind of going to be ranked left to right, regardless of role. So I still think I have Cassidy pretty low. I think his kind of tuck and fan the hammer build can be pretty strong. But other than that, there's just not a lot moving the needle for me with Cassidy. I think it's probably he's a better option to Ashe because he offers more in the mid range and close range while still being able to poke. Ashe just, you have to play so far back and remove, but I think Cassidy does have a bit more optionality in the current iteration. So, and also the one thing I will give Ashe, kind of still talking about her, I think she can handle Reinhardt and Sigma a little bit better than Cassidy can, but this isn't just a who counters the best tanks tier list, right? Freja survived a severe hotfix nerf set of things in Season 16. I don't think came out the best, though. Still a really bursty character, but not near what she was previously. So I have her just under Zarya in B tier, above D.Va. I think Freja is still a really solid DPS choice. I wouldn't say you could go horribly wrong here, right? But I think Freja is honestly just in a good place balance-wise. You can do a lot. You can still do the kind of build I created where you do the Lil Feld and you basically try and get bullet shots with take aim and just kind of cycle those in and out. And kind of do an ability spam before that to pump up your weapon damage. It still can give you a ton of burst, which is good for a lot of things in Stadium. I mean, burst is very strong, but very glass cannon, very vulnerable. And when you're not bursting, you're really not doing much on Freja. That's the biggest drawback. And then we get to Genji. Genji is, I think, my favorite character to play in Stadium. Something about the dash build, when you can get it going, is so satisfying. It's like I can never play Genji in comp because I feel like I just get wrecked. There's just never enough healing for me, and I get targeted, and you're on an island a lot of times as Genji. But with this, I don't know, it feels like it's just so much more rewarding to dash, apply bleed, do all these things. Even still, though, I just don't know that Genji is all that strong. For me, I have Genji right above Ashe in C tier. In particular, Genji just really struggles in the early game. I feel like he has a hard time getting in. It feels like he's countered by a lot of the better heroes in the game. And I feel like, I don't know about everyone else, but more often than not in my games, Genji is not providing much. And this is definitely some bias coming in. And again, this is I want to iterate. This is my favorite hero to play in the mode. I really enjoy playing Genji quite a bit. I've had some absolute pop-off games with Genji, and I've seen teammates do that as well. But it just doesn't feel like in the meta right now, Genji is all that strong. So Genji is going to be a bit lower. Now we have our second new hero, Junkrat. Playing Overwatch, I've always loved Jay Silly. One of my most played heroes probably of all time in Overwatch. I think it's probably like Winston, Junkrat, back in the OG days, like Symmetra. I was kind of a ratty player, you know? And so I was really looking forward to Junkrat coming to Stadium. I think he offers something totally different from the rest of the DPS, right? He's kind of like Mei in that, you know, you're not an aimer necessarily. If you're playing Junkrat, you're just kind of like a movement game sense person. And I've tried every build with him. I've tried the total mayhem, making it crazy and just going in with Tire and trying to do as much damage as you can before you die. I've tried a primary fire build where you do the 2 frag, 2 furious, and you get the one that applies burn and has the extra bounce, and you go for just pure primary fire. I don't know if it's because Sigma and Ryan are so strong, or in so many of my games, or I run into divas that just eat everything. It just doesn't feel like Junkrat can do much right now. So I actually have Junkrat in D tier above Orisa. And I'm sure this is going to make some people insanely angry. But I feel like if there's anyone that's going to get a mid-season buff, it's probably Junkrat. Because he's a new hero to the mode. It does not feel like he's that serviceable. I think he's going to be an interesting one to balance. He's very similar to like Roadhog and Comp, where if you have a strong Roadhog meta, it's pretty unbearable. You're just dealing with Roadhog constantly and you're getting one shot and it's not fun Overwatch. I'm assuming Junkrat is a lot of the same way in Stadium, where he might always be on the lower end of the tier list, because if he's at the top, I could see this mode getting unplayable quickly if Junkrat is dominating, because that means he's just one-shotting. And I've seen this occasionally, like a really ability-scaled Junkrat with mine can basically one-shot if he hits one grenade and a mine. You're dead, right? So that already, walks that line of like, but I think he's okay right now. I think he's in a good place where this isn't too big of a deal. And so I think Junkrat should get a little bit of a buff, but they have to be careful with how they balance this hero in this mode, I think, because otherwise it'll get, I think, pretty out of hand pretty fast. All right, we haven't ranked any DPS very high yet. We've kind of been saving, alphabetically. We've just been saving some of the better DPS for last, I think. I'm actually going to put Mei in A tier. And I think this is because at round 1, you can go 2 completely different paths with Mei based on the enemy team that offer a lot of great utility for your team. And it's one of the heroes with the best ability to kind of fit into any socket. So I think Mei, you know, with the kind of fire hose primary fire build can be really strong. That also can get hard countered by things like Reinhardt or, you know, heavy shield presence to block that, can really shut that down. So if you see that right away, you can build like your boulder and go into that instead. That is still an oppressive build when you're just rolling around, causing blizzards and being a frontline helper. That can be really good with like a Zarya or something where you need, you know, your tank maybe needs a little extra help in creating space, like a Junker Queen maybe. So as a second tank in the current DPS meta, I feel like Mei is very, very strong. Now, Mei can get outplayed and can get burst down from range. There's still problems with playing the character. It's not like it's this invincible beast, but Mei does feel pretty solid right now, I think. Again, things can still counter these top tier heroes, but I still think they're all in pretty good spots. So Mei is going to be A tier below Reinhardt for me. Now we'll move on to Reaper. Reaper's another one where I feel like this hero is hard to rank because I feel like the counterplay to Reaper is pretty manageable, but that also assumes your team is able to work together to do that. A lot of stadium games, it feels like, you know, unless you're in a huge multi-queue or everyone's in comms, it's kind of like normal Overwatch where people can kind of end up on islands, and it does rely on some solo play and one-on-ones and things like that. And in that scenario, Reaper is very good. If Reaper can get into the backline and no one's talking, and he just gets a support or two, I mean, you know, the fight can be over before it starts, and that has happened in my games before. Even when you're multi-queuing, I mean, with friends or whatever, it can still happen. So I feel like Reaper is very, very, very serviceable, but not crazy out of control. So I have him at the top of B tier, right above Zarya. I think, again, I don't love that Reaper's that high. I wish he wasn't. I wish you could swap Reaper and Junkrat's places. I think it'd be good for a while if Reaper was just not very good in this mode. I think Stadium, from a development standpoint, needs to cool down a bit on the brawling. I mean, they brought in Sigma, and I think he's strong, but even then, I think he's strong as kind of a semi-brawler right now, which is wild. There's really no poke meta in this game right now. So, Reaper, gonna be serviceable in the current landscape. We get to our last DPS now, and it's Soldier 76. And I feel like Soldier has a lot to offer in the game mode right now. I feel like it's more often than not that I feel like I am getting harassed by Soldier more than any other DPS. And it's not just his supervisor ability, it's the rockets, it's the ability to run around and heal. This is, I mean, as a hero, his kit is very well-rounded, which I think is good for Stadium in some ways, because you can do a lot, and just like I said for Mei, you can kind of adapt and counter around a lot of different things. So for me, I have Soldier right in between Reinhardt and Mei in A tier. So no S tier DPS, which I think is actually the case. I think DPS feels pretty terrible to play right now overall, if you compare it to support or tank. That could just be my take, but it feels like when I'm queuing and I get DPS, a little tear starts to form and go down my face, because I know that you just don't have the same kind of pop-off potential as a tank or a support does in this mode. At least I think. So if you're going to play DPS in the mode right now, I think a Soldier Mei team is really strong almost all the time. Not to say others can't be, but I do think those two heroes are very serviceable right now. Looking at this list, looking at the DPS now that I've done it, could maybe put Reaper up here as well. Maybe even put Genji in B tier, but I think overall this is okay. DPS just feel like they could all use a little bit of tuning in this mode. But again, it's that same power creep mentality that the main game faces, where you just have to be careful with how you balance some of these characters, or it can really change some things in a sweeping way. But now we'll get to support, and we're starting with Ana. What a place to start, because I think Ana is the worst character in the mode, and I don't think it's close. If there was an F tier, Ana would be in it alone. I don't know how you play this hero right now with any kind of reliability. you know, it's a brawl meta, and so you can throw grenades into the pit, but it feels like there's a ton of things to mitigate that. Even it just Ana does not feel good. If you're watching this video and you're an Ana player, please help me. I think that's my main call out would be help me to understand how to make this hero better. Am I just misunderstanding something at a fundamental level? What's going on? It feels like Ana is just really, really, really bad. And that is also mixed in with the fact that I think literally the rest of these supports are all so strong. So strong. I mean, I would rather just have 4 supports on my team than 2 DPS, 2 supports. I mean, at least in my games, it feels like the support class is really strong right now in Overwatch 2 Stadium. So let's get into Juno. I don't think you can put Juno below B. So this hero offers so much. The torpedo build, it's just insane. I mean, certainly you can counter it with, you know, a soldier, you know, like Juno into a double hit scan team is going to struggle. That's kind of the floor of this hero, right? Into a soldier Ashe team, right? That is going to be hard for Juno to play. You're going to have to get really creative with angles, whatnot. But let's say you happen to run into a Mei Reaper. I mean, Juno is going to have completely free reign in that game, especially if your tank isn't D.Va. Juno should be able to do whatever she wants. So because of that, Juno is going to go top of B tier. I don't think Juno's the best support in the game, or in the mode, or anything like that right now. But I think Juno is extremely strong. It takes everything for me not to put Juno in A tier. And we'll get to that more, why I'm not doing that in a second. Let's look at Kiriko. Kiriko is one that I don't feel like I see a lot of. I don't know if I'm the only one. I think Kiriko offers a lot. I mean, this hero in comp, I mean, with cleanse and everything else, certainly offers a lot. Ult is good. No problems with Kiriko, honestly. But I don't see a lot of Kiriko, and I don't think that's a problem. I just think this hero is losing out to how strong some of her counterparts are. A few that we have yet to get to. Spoiler. But I think Kiriko is okay. I'm honestly live. I'm debating this between a C tier, like right here and here. I think we're gonna go here. This is probably pretty heinous to do because I think Kiriko is really strong. But this is partially a consideration towards other options. So this is, I guess, an element of the way I do tier lists is, yes, it's based on how overtuned the hero is, because I think Kiriko is very strong. But you also have to look at, like, anytime you queue a game, you have a choice of what hero you play. And there's a limited number of choices based on the role you're in. And if, you know, I'm playing a thing with 10 choices and 9 are S tier and 1 is A tier, well, that A tier one all of a sudden becomes like a C or D tier, kind of naturally, because it just loses out so hard to the other options. That's kind of what I'm getting at in a less eloquent way here with Kiriko. I think this is still a really strong hero. Would, I think, on average, perform better than a Genji would. Probably better than a Cassidy would, even to a degree. But I think with the other options, just cannot rank it very high. Lucio's next, though. And I think Lucio is one I have personally not figured out how to become a Stadium Lucio legend. But I think a lot of other people have. So I think this is a me issue. I think Lucio is firmly A tier. Honestly, yeah, I think this is good. Maybe I was going to put him above Soldier, but I think this is still fine. Lucio feels really strong. When you get into a Lucio that can be in your back line and oppressing you the whole time and becomes almost impossible to kill, and then gets backed up by a brawly tank or a D.Va flying in or a Reinhardt charging in, it can just get very oppressive very quickly. And I think that's thanks to Lucio's kit, his obviously his ability to deal damage too with the boops, things like that. I think Lucio's a killer in Stadium, honestly. Let's talk about Mercy, though. I think this is weird. I can't remember what I rated Mercy at last time I did this list. It was obviously a little bit ago now. But I think Mercy is really strong. I have played with some Mercies that have completely changed the game. And again, I feel like I would have been critical on this character in the past because in a there's no damage. I mean, that is always the problem with Mercy, is there's just no damage. But I think with Resurrect being as good as it is, it provides so much more valuable utility than any single point of damage could ever do. And so I think Mercy right now might be the best character in Stadium, which is crazy. I think she's better than Sigma. I think if you have a Mercy on your team, you can throw in just about any other support and almost any DPS, and you're going to be at least in a decent spot. This is not to say Mercy can't feed, but Mercy has enough maneuverability to escape the hit scan pressure that, you know, someone like Freja might get or Juno might get as kind of floaters, you know, in the sky. Mercy's not like that. Mercy is so darty, so quick, and provides so much value to the team, really benefits from the powers. Mercy just feels chef's kiss, very, very strong. And speaking of strong, listen, I think I put this list out last time, and people were saying, oh, Moira, not that good. And I honestly don't understand. I don't know that we're playing the same game. Every time I see a Moira in Stadium, I'm like, well, that's going to be the most dominant hero. This game, she is so strong. And again, this is the opposite of Mercy. This is a stat stuffer. So Moira is almost constantly throughout the game applying a stat, a heal or a damage or something. There's very little other utility outside of that. And that's the one knock against Moira, and I understand that. You can't just rate a hero based on the damage and healing output they do in a game. That's not what the tier list is about. There's plenty of other factors. But that is a huge part of the game mode. I mean, you have to apply points of healing and you have to do points of damage to win the game. And Moira does that better than any other character in the game, and it's not close. So I think Moira is S tier right behind Sigma. Again, just for all those reasons I just mentioned, just feels really hard to deal with in a lot of different ways. The maneuverability, again, to the same point as Mercy, easy to escape out of most situations, and your cooldowns are so fast that you really don't feel the pain of being on like in a cooldown drought ever. I mainly, when I play Moira, play the multi-ball build, and it's just, there's not much people can do about it. I mean, I guess D.Va can eat the balls, so maybe that's the hardest counter in the game to Moira is D.Va. Maybe Sigma can pull one off, like with Kinetic Grasp, and eat it. Other than that, there's not much you can do. Especially you throw Cyber Venom on those, and you're applying healing reduction to everyone. It's just really hard to deal with Moira in this mode, I think. So, maybe not as good from a raw standpoint as Mercy, and there's some considerations where, like, at the highest level, I'm sure Moira can get shut down pretty fast. However, for 85% of the players in Stadium, I think Moira is a dominant pick, especially if you're in those lower elos. I think Moira can absolutely shred. And now we get to our last hero and our last new character in Stadium. If you like the video, by the way, like and subscribe to the channel. Always putting out more Stadium stuff here at the Game House. But let's look at Zenyatta. There's a lot to like about Zenyatta. There's also a lot not to like. So, maneuverability-wise, bro is frozen in the mud. I mean, he is as easy of a dive target as you could think. If the other team has a Genji or a Reaper, it is going to be hard to survive as Zenyatta. That being said, he does have an amazing set of powers with Enlightenment and some other things basically where he's able to give healing orbs to multiple targets, basically have one himself, and then scale healing based on his damage, so you basically just build damage. If you can fend for yourself at least a little bit with your weapon power when you get dove, or even just attacking people from the backline, there's a lot of sustain with Zenyatta, which is something he's never had in Overwatch. I mean, he's always been his problem in comp and the standard mode is staying alive and providing heavy amounts of healing. So he can do a little bit more healing. He's not going to be a crazy healer. I've played with Zenyatta on my team, and if you're playing a tank, it's like you just have to hope your Zenyatta is going to get some damage because you're not going to get a ton of healing. There's going to be shorter fights, basically, I think, with Zenyatta. All that to say, I think Zenyatta is top of A tier. Top of A tier. There are things that can shut him down, namely Reinhardt, who he's right above, I think is a huge counter to Zenyatta. But I still think Zen is an incredible healer in the mode, and one that if you're looking to play one of the new heroes, I think he's a great one to try. So that's going to overall do it. I want to talk about the meta really, really quick, just to kind of round out this video. Looking at this tier list, I think there are a few things I would put a premium on. So optionality is number one. I don't think it's as important with, let's say, Mercy and Moira, but I think every other hero up there at the top can really change their game based on the situation of the game. If you're playing this really trying to strategize from round one, when you decide that first power, what direction is my hero going to go, I think that's where you get a ton of value. I would never go into a stadium game, if you're really trying to climb, saying I'm going to play this build on this hero. It should always be at least somewhat based in what are you expecting from the enemy team? What do their heroes generally bring to the table, right? That should dictate how I play my hero, at least to some level, right? So optionality is very important. Premium. Especially you think about someone like Mei, Lucio, Reinhardt, Sigma. All tons and tons of optionality. Soldier, with how you play those heroes in this game mode. That honestly is pretty chief here. Otherwise, I think it's still a pretty brawly meta. If you can find ways to survive in the backline, I think you can offer up a lot for your team. But otherwise, you kind of need to be able to survive in the mix a lot of the time. Zenyatta is really the only exception in this top two rows of a hero that really can't survive that well as a in the mix kind of brawler character. And even then, he kind of can. With self-heal, with his kick ability, if you wanted to go that route, he can kind of fight. And all the rest of these heroes can certainly brawl. I mean, you're going to be off-angling with Soldier, so not exactly the same example, but still has enough sustain to handle any situation. So all in all, this is kind of how I see the meta shaking out right now, is you have some variety of long-range poke, maybe with a Soldier and a Zen on your team, maybe. You have a formidable frontline tank, so I would say Reinhardt and Sigma are my two choices for that. And you have just solid supports that can offer up a lot of different things. If I had a Mercy Moira support line, I would be feeling really good, because Mercy is going to keep everyone up and can focus on multi-target healing and also be kind of a focus on your tank. Moira can mainly throw damage orbs with the occasional healing orb and primary healing to provide enough healing on top of it to just kind of stat everyone out. And that feels like a really, really strong lineup right now. I think that lineup would be serviceable at any rank and against almost any set of opponents. But this is just my tier list at the end of the day. I don't want to yap too long. Be sure and let me know in the comments what you think of these ranks. Is it just totally off in your mind? Am I spot on? What do you think? Let me know. And as always, thank you all so much for tuning in. We'll have more content from Overwatch 2 Stadium here at the Game House. We've already got some, well, we have new builds for all the new heroes. And on the website, I've got kind of a best build for each hero guide. I'll throw those both in the description of the video if you want to check those out. I'm slowly updating all of my builds from Season 16 to Season 17. They have codes. They're completely built out. So if you are a newer player just needing somewhere to start, I think I've got you, hopefully. But thanks for tuning in. And from our house to yours, we'll see you all next time for more Overwatch 2 Stadium content.